Hi, my name is Yulia Sokolova, and in this video I'm gonna be showing how I created this character in 3D based on the concept of Poopikat. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more of such process videos, as I have some more coming up soon. I'm a character artist in video games working at 9 Entertainment. We're an independent studio making our first game right now. I'm responsible for the 2D concepts of all the characters in this game and for creating all these characters in 3D. At the moment, I've designed and modeled about 40 characters, and I still have a few more to work on. Sometimes I also model props and do various environment stuff in Unity. So in my work I mainly use ZBrush, Blender or Maya, and Substance Painter, and a render engine for presentation. For this project I'm gonna be using only ZBrush, as it wasn't meant to be a game-ready character, so it will be a high-poly sculpt painted in ZBrush. I start my character from blocking it out from spheres and simple basic shapes. As for the hands, I used the ones that I already had, and I stitch it to my model in Blender to have a clean edge flow. Almost always I prefer to start with a very low poly count, and I try to create as clean geometry as possible, in case if I want to reuse some parts for the low poly or for modeling an outfit. If there are any parts that are harder to model, like the ears for example, I increase the resolution, dynamesh the subtool, and use masks to give them a desired shape. Hair is also pretty simple and messy at this point. I just make it from dynameshed spheres, trying to work more on the silhouette rather than on the details. For things that are kinda hard surface modeling, like this hat for instance, I either model it in Blender or I create it direct in ZBrush using the ZModeler tool. It might be tricky, but for simple things it works fine. If I need to define some shapes or I run out of the resolution in my Dynamesh subtool, I use the Sculpt Pro to add some more polygons to the mesh. When it comes to creating the face, I duplicate the subtool, just in case, subdivide it a few times, and then I Dynamesh it to be able to sculpt facial features. As for creating the brows, there are several techniques. I either mask, extract and zero mesh it, or I use the topology brush to draw the shape I want, and most of the time I do it this way because it's cleaner and I have more control over the shape. Also, if I need the shape for the low poly version later, I just reuse this lower subdivision. I don't care too much about the minor details at this step, I'm just trying to preserve the proportions and make it look as close to the concept as possible. The main thing you need to pay attention to at this point is the size and the shape of the eyes, the distance between the eyes and the distance between the eyes and the nose and the mouth, the size and the shape of the chin, and the shape of the head in general. For more detailed characters, I usually model the eyelids and create the lips and the inner part of the mouth, but since this character is a bit simpler, I just sculpt it directly on the face without using Curved Tubes brush or any other tools. The main tools that I use at this step is the Clay Builder brush, Dam Standard brush or Mac Cut brush, and the Move brush. I have only the front view in the concept, but I try to make sure that the face looks correct from the side view as well as from all other angles. I prefer to add the eyes and paint the pupil early on to make the character look more alive and appealing. This way it's easier for me to see the whole picture. As you can notice at this step, the resolution is still pretty low. For the eyelashes, I also use the topology brush to create a desired shape. This time I decided to try another technique for the eyelashes. I subdivide the mesh a few times and I'm gonna use the snake hook brush to drag out the single eyelashes, the single hairs. Most of the time I use this brush with the Sculpt Pro activated. This way I don't run out of resolution and I have some more polygons to work with. Later on I'll be going back and forth with the eyelashes, trying to find the shape that I like. I always keep a copy of the subtools until the very end, in case if I need to go back and to have a nice, clean and low resolution geometry. I add the lower eyelashes the same way using the topology brush, and I'm trying to simplify the shape as much as I can, and the good thing is always to zoom out and check if the details are reading nicely from the distance without creating visual noise. At this step, I like to add some colors to the skin and to other parts of the character to imagine how the finished version will look like, more or less. This helps me to see the character with a fresh eye, and it also helps to stop detailing it at a certain step, because this process might get infinite, and I don't want to go too crazy with it, trying to keep everything simple. I'm using the basic ring shape to model the glasses and the cylinder for the temples. As for the clothes, I mask out the parts that I want to use, and then I just delete the unwanted pieces. And since I already had a rather clean geometry from the sphere that I created at the very beginning, it's more of a modeling process rather than sculpting, particularly for this character. I like to use the dynamic subdivision function that also have a thickness preview to have a better understanding of how the high poly version will look like without actually having to subdivide it at this step. This way I have a better control over the shape, and it's very easy to toggle on and off this preview. I'm using the ZBrush brush to extrude and model the color of the shirt around the neck. Now it's time to check the proportions. I make the concept image semi-transparent in Spotlight, and then I just put my model beneath it to see if I need to change the size of the eyes or the position of the nose and the mouth. It's not a very precise way, but it helps to move on if you're short on time and you got stuck or tired of looking at the face of your character and you can't see clearly what's lacking or why does it look off. Sometimes it helps to see the issue. At this step, I don't care too much about destroying the face like sculpting on top of it, because I'll be zero meshing it later and transferring all the details onto a clean mesh. When I'm pretty happy with the proportions, I finally start detailing the face by sculpting the eyelids, defining the nose and the mouth. I'm using the damp standard brush and MAC cut brush, sometimes pinched to make the edges sharper. Now it's time to remesh our model. I'm using the Easy Remesh plugin, but all its functions are actually basic ZBrush functions and you can do the same without the add-on. But for me, it's just more convenient this way because it's all in one menu. So what it basically does is that it uses the poly paint as the guidelines for the edge flow. You need to mark the loops around the eyes, the nose and the mouth to make sure that the add-on creates loops in these places. You can also do the same using the ZBrush guides by marking the specific loops. This is also a back and forth process that requires some more adjustments. Sometimes I try different ZBrush settings. For example, I noticed that the legacy mode works better for the organic shapes, and even if the topology is not super clean at this step, I'm pretty happy with it because it preserved the flow that I needed for my sculpt, and now when I will subdivide the mesh, it will look a lot cleaner with the details projected onto it. Also, when you have a lower subdivision, it's a lot easier to make big changes in the proportion using the Move brush. It works a lot better and it's easier to make a cleaner mesh, smoothing also works a lot better, and you don't get those wobbly shapes that you have after sculpting. If some of the shapes got washed away, I just restore them using the damp standard brush to define the minor details. I'm also reapplying the poly paint as I'm gonna use it for my final render. As I mentioned, I wasn't really happy with the eyelashes, so I decided to go another way and use the curved toothbrush to make a new shape. I feel this way it matches the style of the character much better. Now it's time to add the sleeves of the dress. I'm also modeling them using the ZBrush brush, and then I sent my model to Blender to stitch together the sleeves and the dress to have a nicer, cleaner topology. I'm adding some buttons using the Insert Mesh brush. I'm trying to keep the shapes of the dress as simple and clean as possible. As for the pockets, I mask the desired shape and then I just extract and zero mesh it. It can be done using the Extract Plus add-on or directly from the subtool menu. Now I'm making a chameleon. It will be a bit different from the one that we see on the concept, since it's a Draw This in Your Style challenge. I wanted to make it look a bit sillier, like the chameleons have their eyes on the sides of the head, and on the concept, for me it looks more like a frog, so I'll try to make it look a bit more derp-ish, if you know what I mean. Same thing, I'm using a very simple basic shapes to block out the main volumes, and then I dynamesh everything and start defining the mesh, still in a pretty low resolution. I'm using the curved toothbrush for the tail to make it nice and curled. Now it's time to model the book, and in this case I'm modeling it in Blender, but it can also be done with the ZModeler brush in ZBrush, because it's a very simple prop. I'm also posing the book, so to say, by positioning the pages. Now back to our character. As for the folds, I'm sculpting those by hand using the SK cloth brush, or the standard brush and damp standard brush. Sometimes I also use orb cracks brush, and it's amazing for sculpting stylized folds. It's basically all you need, you can just go with this one. I also like to define the shapes of the folds by using the pinch brush and cut brush to make the sharper edges. In fact, such simple character doesn't require any detailed or realistic folds. I just need to add a few simple ones in the main areas where the cloth deforms, like in the armpits, around the elbows, and in my case, at this bell-shaped part of the sleeve. Now I'm posing the model in ZBrush using the transpose tool and masking the parts that I don't want to be moved. I'm also defining a bit more the fingers and the hands. Hands are a very important part of any character, and it's very easy to notice when the hands are badly posed, like when the fingers are far away from each other. I always look at the references of a real hand, grabbing an object to see how the hand rests, the position of the fingers to make it look more natural and believable. It might get a bit time-consuming, but it's always worth it. And then I'm cleaning up the mesh using the move and the smooth brushes because some parts can get broken and deformed, and it's totally fine. One of my favorite parts to work on is the hair, because every time it's very different and it requires a different approach. What works for one character might not work for the other characters, so it's more of a creative process. For this character, for instance, I had to kinda invent a new technique, because I didn't want to sculpt every single curl on her hair. I wanted to keep it simple, but at the same time to make it obvious that she has a lot of curls on her head. So what I did was I sculpted these like bubbles, and then I used this spiral brush to make those twirls, spinning each bubble in different directions. This process is not very tedious for me, even though it might look so, but in reality it's a very creative and relaxing process that I enjoy a lot, especially if you don't have a deadline. As with any other part of the character, when working on the hair and the shapes like this, I try to stick to the rule of making large, medium and small shapes, and to look at the model from the distance to make sure that I'm not putting too much detail into it. Then I'm using the curved toothbrush that I adjusted a bit to add the hair strands on top of the curls to make those curly flyaways that we see on the concept. So what I basically do here is I make a strand, then I'm using the move brush and the spiral brush to make a curl, and this way I work manually on each strand to make it look more natural. I have a lot of hair brushes from different artists that I follow, and for each new character you have to decide which one works better. Sometimes it's even easier to make your own one. And now some finishing touches after I've placed all the objects together. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see some more work-in-progress videos of character creation, tips and tricks on working in ZBrush, Blender, Substance Painter, Marmoset Toolbag, and other programs that I use on a daily basis in my work. And this is how it came up. Hope you like it, thanks for watching guys, and I see you in the next one. Bye!